Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for doing
Good
this interview
morning.
with me. You
Sure.
have a ton of experience as an RBT, and I would just like to ask you a few questions about you discuss your experience working in as an RBT.
Sure. My experience has had its ups and downs for sure.
Mhm.
Um, First of all, if I had my choice between in-home and clinic, I would choose clinic. Like, okay, let's say 90. I would
Okay.
choose clinic 90% of the time
Okay.
because with in-home, I personally, not all people are like this, but for me, I have I guess, a shyness about going into people's houses,
Hmm.
into someone else's space, and fitting into their environment.
Right.
Um, I also there's also the social aspect that I think of as far as interacting with the parents more consistently than if they were just dropping their kids off at the clinic.
Okay.
So that's the first thing for me. Secondly, once I do get in the home and whatever rapport I've built with the family, there are a lot more factors to deal with in home. It's almost like a swimming upstream
Okay.
because there's so many environmental factors that you have to manage, as well as the client. So yes, you do have to manage dealing with parents. Oh my goodness. So many times I've had to deal with siblings or like other family members who are kids that stop by that day and you don't know that they're going to be there. Like, for example, there was one client that I had, and it was just that one client that I had to work with. But then
Hmm.
out of the blue, on some days, I would stop over and there would be like five cousins there,
Oh, okay.
and all the cousins wanted to come and play. Like they thought it
Oh,
was
I see.
playtime.
Right.
And then, yeah, I would mention it to the parents, and the parents don't want anybody to feel left out.
Right.
So it was kind of like, all right, well, the cousins are here. You just have to deal with it. They want to play, they don't want to feel left out. So
Hmm.
they're here. And it's kind of, I mean, honestly, for me, I felt like just leaving when that happened to me. I was like, this is not a part of the deal. This is
Yeah.
not in my contract or whatever. I'm out.
Hmm.
But I stayed, and tried to make it into a play session and still tried to find a way to do therapy. And for me, that's really frustrating because I'm like, okay, don't you want your child to receive therapy?
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand what they think therapy is. I guess they see us playing and think that that's all it is playtime. And they probably feel
Right.
like, well, how difficult can it be to play with more kids? And because you're actually, there's goals that you're working towards, and that's difficult when like, kids just want attention all the time. So if that is not the kid that you're working with, they're all going to be saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And
Hmm.
you have to find a way to be nice and still give your client the
Right.
attention. And then of course the issue with pets, like I don't mind pets, but there are pets that have been very intrusive and very distracting. Like there was one client that I had, and the pet would just literally just come up and snatch the toys that we were working with,
Oh, yeah.
and we would try to take it away, and it would turn into this whole big game with like getting the toys back from the dog,
Oh
or the
my
dog would
God.
just walk up and pee on the floor
Oh, oh,
while in the area we were working in. So then
oh,
we had to
mm,
disassemble and clean
mhm,
everything, and
mhm,
yeah, that can
mhm.
get really tricky.
So, how do you feel about driving to different homes? Would you prefer to drive to one location?
That's kind of, I would say that I'm about 50-50 on that one. I
Okay.
do enjoy driving.
Okay.
Um, and I do enjoy not always being in the same place all the time.
Okay.
However, driving from place to place can get very exhausting.
Hmm.
And if all you do is drive from place to place every day, it can start to feel like you live in your car.
Right.
And for me, I was like eating all my meals in the car, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner was being eaten in the car. And the car was just getting piled up with all kinds of junk. Yeah. Well, for me, I would start by keeping things that I need for the majority of the clients. Certain toys I knew that all clients like bubbles and Play-Doh and stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
it started piling up with things that I need for myself, like maybe a change of shoes. I need to
Mm-hmm.
keep a jacket in the car. And then before I knew it, like the car was just so full of everything, like in the trunk and in the back seat. Just I felt like my whole life was in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And then driving from place to place every day, all the time, can
Mm-hmm.
get exhausting. It can
Right.
start
For
off as
sure.
nice.
Right.
Yeah, it can start off as nice, but then after a while, it can just
Gets
get
old.
exhausting.
Right.
Yes. So that's kind of how I felt. And expensive. And even though the company that I worked for does reimburse you, I don't always feel it. Actually, so
Right.
maybe I should go check and see if they were actually giving me my reimbursement, because sometimes it didn't feel like it. It felt like I was just paying for gas, and that
Yeah.
reimbursement, it barely
Mm-hmm.
makes a blip. Right. Well, I do appreciate the flexibility that you get from in-home.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally, well, the company that I worked for, if you needed to cancel, you would kind of just let the family know, and then you would let the supervisor know, like at some point. So I did like that. In clinic, I actually have some like horror stories
Oh, wow.
from in working in clinic where
Okay.
like there was one clinic I had to resign from
Mm-hmm.
because of how they just messed around with my schedule. How
Oh.
I would have a client in the morning. Well, first of all, when I took the job, they said that even if the client canceled, that I still would have work in the clinic. But that is not what happened. So the client would cancel. I would be on my way to work, and they would say, "Oh, this client is not here. You can go home." But then they would later say, "Oh, well, we need." Okay, let's say they said you don't have to worry about coming in until 3. Then I would go home and they would change it and say, "Hey, we need you to get here in by 12." And 12 would be like 15 minutes away. And if
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't make it, then I would receive what I felt was a retaliatory punishment. Like there was a time they needed me to hurry up and get there, and they only needed to schedule me for 30 minutes. And then there was like a 3-hour gap between then and when I
Oh,
actually
I
had to
see.
clock in.
Right.
So the scheduling, I would say that I do prefer the in-home scheduling, even though the in-home can be tricky too,
Mm-hmm.
because there have been times I've showed up to a family's home and they either have forgotten that there was
Right.
a session and they're not even at home at all,
Right. So a
or
lot of
there's
cancellation.
there's like a party going on when you get there. And that's the thing about it, because they don't necessarily cancel ahead of time. They don't
Right.
drive all the way, and it's really that can really hurt, especially if you have a client that's very far away.
Right.
If some clients like I've heard other people say they've had to drive a couple of hours. So if you have a client where you have to drive a couple hours and you sit in traffic and then you get there, and then when you get there they cancel, I mean that could be very, very frustrating.
Very
So
much. As far as your being supervised or any
mhm,
support that you received from the behavior analyst that you were working with.
mhm. Well, I really feel like the supervision it really depends on like the company's outlook on supervision and the individual supervisor,
Mhm.
because that one is a little tricky, because in home I would say you would get an overlap once a week, which is fine. However, some supervisors are, I don't, I've had
Mhm.
supervisors that just don't care.
Mhm.
Supervisors in the home. Let me do in home first.
Mhm.
I've had
Mhm.
supervisors who come to the home and they don't care. Then
Mhm.
I've had, and so you don't get any input from them. Then I've had supervisors that are just, they watch and then they guide and they give you input and you can
Right.
ask questions and then it's great.
Right.
Then I've had supervisors who show up to the home and it's like, all they want to do is talk about their life, their day. And I felt like I've had to give the supervisor more attention than I'm giving the client. And
Mm.
it feels, it just sucks all the energy,
Right.
like, and so yeah, I personally feel like once a week supervision is fine for me, at least. Some people may not feel that way, but for me, it was fine. Okay, so now let's say in the clinic where I worked, there was always someone constantly there. Like I would say I was getting an overlap maybe twice a day.
Right.
Maybe there was a day or two where I wasn't getting an overlap. So at first it was a little frustrating because like I don't want to be watched all the time. Just give me a moment to connect with the client to, work things out the way I would like to. However, I came to find that those overlaps were so important. And the way that this particular company overlapped was not super intrusive. Even though, like I said before, there were some supervisors who were a little bit more intrusive than others. But in general, I think they were all trained to watch more than they input.
Right.
So, and that turned out to be for me, that turned out to be a great type of relationship. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. I appreciate it. So thank you so much.
And yeah, this was fun. Anytime.